The soda hit Derek Holloway's skull like a baptism of humiliation. Ice-cold cola dripped down his temples, burning his eyes, soaking into his second-hand collar, while the cafeteria erupted in laughter. Then, Chad Prescott's fingers gripped his neck, slamming Derek's face into the mashed potatoes so hard the tray cracked against the table. 300 students watched. Teachers looked away. This was Westbrook Academy's favorite sport, and Derek was always the target. The scholarship kid. The charity case. The class loser who dared exist among trust funds and country club memberships. 4 years of this. 4 years of swallowed pride and bloody lips and walking home alone in the rain. 10 years later, those same golden boys sent him an invitation, a reunion. What the elegant envelope didn't mention was the bet circulating in their group chat. $50 says Derek's still mopping floors. $200 says he won't even show his face. They wanted entertainment, a reminder that some people are born to be stepped on. But when that black helicopter thundered over the oak trees, when its shadow darkened the manicured lawn where they stood clutching champagne, when Derek Holloway stepped onto the grass in a $3,000 suit with his company's logo gleaming on the aircraft behind him, the laughter died in their throats. And the story of what happened next would haunt Westbrook Academy for generations. The autumn of 2011 painted Westbrook Academy in shades of privilege that Derek Holloway could never afford. He walked through those iron gates every morning with holes in his shoes and hunger in his stomach, clutching a backpack held together by safety pins and desperate hope. His mother worked 3 jobs to keep him enrolled. The scholarship covered tuition, but everything else came from her bleeding hands and sleepless nights. She cleaned houses during the day, waitressed in the evenings, and stocked shelves at the grocery store until midnight. She believed education would save her son from the poverty that had swallowed their family whole. Derek believed it too, back then, before he understood that some doors remain closed, no matter how hard you knock. Chad Prescott noticed Derek on the first day of freshman year. Not because Derek stood out. He tried desperately to blend in, to become invisible among the sea of designer clothes and luxury cars that filled the student parking lot. Chad noticed him precisely because he didn't belong. The worn collar turning gray from too many washes. The generic sneakers with the brand name rubbed off. The lunch bag instead of the meal card everyone else carried. Chad's father owned half the commercial real estate in the county, and Chad had inherited his father's instinct for identifying weakness, for finding the vulnerable spot and pressing until something broke. He smiled at Derek across the cafeteria that first day, and Derek made the mistake of smiling back, thinking he'd found a friend in this hostile landscape. He found a predator instead. The first incident happened during the second week of school. Derek was eating alone in the corner of the cafeteria, trying to make himself small, when Chad's shadow fell across his tray. 4 other boys flanked him like soldiers following a general. Bradley Whitmore, whose family owned the local news stations. Twins Carter and Cooper Ellis, from the banking dynasty that controlled most of the region's financial institutions. And Victor Haynes, whose father sat on the school board and played golf with the superintendent every Sunday. They surrounded Derek's table like wolves circling a wounded deer. Chad picked up Derek's sandwich, peanut butter on white bread, the cheapest thing his mother could pack, and examined it with theatrical disgust. "What is this? Food stamps cuisine?" The others laughed on cue, a chorus of cruelty. Derek reached for his sandwich, and Chad let it fall to the floor, grinding it under his Italian leather shoe until the bread was nothing but crumbs mixed with cafeteria grime. Oops. That night, Derek went to bed hungry, but he didn't tell his mother. He couldn't add that weight to shoulders already breaking under the burden of keeping them alive. The escalation was gradual and systematic, designed to destroy without leaving marks that administrators would be forced to address. They knocked books from his hands in hallways, sending papers scattering while crowds laughed. They spilled drinks on his homework, ruining assignments he'd spent hours perfecting. They started rumors that he was on welfare, that his mother was a prostitute, that he lived in a homeless shelter and showered at the YMCA. None of it was true, but truth had no currency at Westbrook Academy. Derek learned to walk with his head down, to eat in bathroom stalls where no one could find him, to arrive early and leave late to avoid the gauntlet of sneers and shoves. He learned that reporting the abuse only made it worse. Chad's father donated a new gymnasium the same week Derek filed his first complaint, and suddenly, the administration couldn't find any evidence of wrongdoing. The principal looked Derek in the eye and suggested perhaps he was being overly sensitive. Sophomore year brought physical escalation. The shoves became punches thrown in blind spots between security cameras. Derek came home with bruises he blamed on clumsiness, black eyes he attributed to a ball in gym class. His mother worked too many hours to notice the lies fracturing behind his eyes. The cafeteria incident, the one that would haunt his nightmares for a decade, happened on a Tuesday in October. Derek had just sat down with his tray when Chad appeared behind him. The conversation that followed was loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Hey everyone, class loser alert. Want to see what charity cases eat?" Before Derek could react, Chad grabbed the back of his head and slammed his face into the mashed potatoes. The tray cracked against the table. Gravy splattered across his only clean shirt. Cola soaked through his collar from Bradley's contribution to the performance. 300 students watched. Some laughed. Most looked away, grateful they weren't the target. When Derek lifted his head, mashed potatoes dripping from his hair, humiliation burning hotter than the cola in his eyes, he saw Mr. Henderson, the calculus teacher, standing 15 feet away. Their eyes met. Mr. Henderson turned and walked out of the cafeteria. Junior year, Derek stopped hoping for rescue. He stopped hoping for anything except survival. He became a ghost, haunting the hallways of Westbrook Academy, present in body but absent in spirit. His grades suffered, but not enough to lose his scholarship. That would have been a mercy Chad wouldn't allow. The torture needed a living target. Derek developed a stutter that appeared only at school, only when Chad was near. He flinched at sudden movements. He stopped sleeping through the night, waking from nightmares where the cafeteria stretched into infinity and the laughter never stopped. His mother finally noticed the change during Christmas break, when Derek refused to leave his room for 3 days. She sat on the edge of his bed, this woman who worked herself to exhaustion for his future, and asked what was wrong. Derek looked at her calloused hands, her tired eyes, the gray spreading through her hair like frost, and he lied. "Just stressed about exams, Mom. I'm fine." He couldn't break her heart with the truth that her sacrifice was buying him nothing but daily humiliation. Senior year arrived with the slow certainty of an execution. Derek had learned to predict Chad's moods by the set of his shoulders, learned to navigate the school like a soldier crossing a minefield, learned that survival meant never looking anyone in the eye. The final incident happened 3 weeks before graduation. Derek was walking to his car, a rusted 1994 Honda with more rust than paint, when Chad and his crew surrounded him in the parking lot. No witnesses, no cameras. Chad's smile was the last thing Derek saw before the first punch landed. They beat him methodically, avoiding his face, but turning his torso into a canvas of bruises. When they finished, Chad crouched beside Derek's crumpled form and whispered, "Remember this feeling, class loser. This is what you are. This is all you'll ever be. 20 years from now, you'll still be nothing, and I'll still be everything. That's just how the world works." Derek lay in that parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at the sky, something changing inside him, not breaking, hardening. Graduation day arrived beneath a perfect blue sky that felt like mockery. Derek sat in his folding chair among 300 students, invisible as always, watching Chad deliver the valedictorian speech about excellence and opportunity and reaching for the stars. The audience applauded. Parents beamed. Derek's mother sat in the back row, wearing her only nice dress, crying tears of pride for a son who had told her nothing about 4 years of hell. When Derek walked across the stage to collect his diploma, his eyes found Chad's in the crowd. Chad smirked, that same confident smirk that had preceded 4 years of torment. Derek didn't react, but something passed between them in that moment. A promise from Derek, unspoken but absolute. He would not be nothing. He would not remain the class loser. He would build himself into something so far beyond Chad's comprehension that this moment would become a footnote in a story of transformation. The years after Westbrook Academy tested Derek in ways Chad Prescott never could. He enrolled at State University on a partial scholarship, working 40 hours a week at a warehouse unloading trucks while carrying a full course load in computer science. Sleep became a luxury he couldn't afford. 3 hours a night, sometimes 4 if he was lucky. His apartment was a studio smaller than Chad's closet, with a mattress on the floor, a desk made from cinder blocks and plywood, and a laptop he'd assembled from discarded parts found at electronics recyclers. He ate ramen noodles so often he still can't stand the smell. But every night, before exhaustion pulled him under, Derek repeated the same words to himself. This is temporary. The struggle is temporary. What I'm building is permanent. Those words became his prayer, his mantra, his reason to wake up and keep fighting. During his sophomore year at State, Derek met Franklin Torres in an advanced programming class. Franklin was everything Derek wasn't. Loud, confident, perpetually optimistic, despite growing up in circumstances even harder than Derek's. His mother had been a single parent working 2 jobs, his father absent since birth, his neighborhood. The kind of place where gunshots were lullabies and survival was an achievement. Franklin had clawed his way to college through sheer brilliance and stubborn refusal to become a statistic, turning down scholarship offers from gang leaders who wanted to hire his coding skills for less legal enterprises. The 2 outcasts recognized something in each other immediately: the hunger of men who had been told they would amount to nothing, and the fury of men determined to prove the world wrong. Their friendship forged in late-night coding sessions and shared dreams that seemed impossible. Franklin had an idea for a software platform that would revolutionize supply chain management for small businesses, companies too small for enterprise solutions, but too complex for spreadsheets. Derek had the technical skills to build it. Together, they started sketching out what would eventually become Nexus Logistics, writing code in notebooks during lunch breaks and debugging on napkins during study sessions. Their first prototype was built on that salvaged laptop in Derek's tiny apartment, powered by cheap coffee and expensive dreams. They didn't know they were building something that would change their lives. They only knew they were building something that was theirs. The summer before senior year, Derek's mother was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She had ignored the symptoms for months. The weight loss, the fatigue, the pain she dismissed as nothing. Unable to afford a doctor's visit, unwilling to burden her son with worry. By the time she finally saw a specialist, the disease had spread to her liver and lymph nodes. Derek wanted to drop out immediately, to spend every remaining moment by her side. His mother refused with a strength that belied her failing body. "You finish what you started," she told him, her voice still fierce, even as her body betrayed her. "That's all I've ever wanted, to see you become something. Don't you dare let me down now." She died 3 weeks before his graduation, in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and sorrow. Derek held her hand as she passed, this woman who had given everything so he could have a chance, and he made her a promise. He would become something. He would honor her sacrifice with success she could have never imagined. Franklin and Derek launched Nexus Logistics 6 months after graduation, operating out of Franklin's grandmother's garage in a neighborhood where police sirens were more common than birdsong. Their first year was a disaster of epic proportions. Nobody would take meetings with two young men with no connections, no pedigree, no fancy surnames that opened doors. They survived on credit card debt and stubbornness, maxing out cards to keep servers running, borrowing from family members who had nothing to spare. Their second year was worse. They almost went bankrupt twice, sleeping in the office because they couldn't afford apartments, eating one meal a day to stretch their dwindling resources. Derek remembered nights when he wasn't sure they would make it, when the weight of failure pressed down so hard he could barely breathe. But the software worked, the platform performed exactly as designed, and small businesses that tried it saw their efficiency double, their costs halve. Word spread slowly, then faster. A grocery chain in Texas became their first major client, then a manufacturing company in Ohio, then a logistics firm in California that recommended them to 6 others. During the 4th year of Nexus Logistics, something unexpected happened. Derek was working late on a server upgrade when a notification appeared, a message from a woman named Audrey Walsh, a kindergarten teacher who had found his contact through a mutual friend. She was asking if he might be interested in getting coffee sometime. Derek almost deleted the message. He had no time for relationships, no room for anything beyond work and the relentless pursuit of success. But something about her words, warm and genuine, with no pretense or agenda, made him pause. He replied. 1 coffee became 2. 2 became dinner. Dinner became something Derek had never allowed himself to hope for. Love. Audrey saw past the driven entrepreneur to the wounded boy beneath. She understood his nightmares without needing explanations, understood his compulsive need to prove himself without demanding answers. When she became pregnant after 2 years together, Derek proposed in the same garage where Nexus Logistics was born. Their daughter arrived on a spring morning that smelled of lilacs. They named her Rose, after Derek's mother. But life never stops testing those who dare to rise. Audrey developed complications during Rose's birth, a hemorrhage that led to infection that became sepsis. She fought for 3 months in the ICU, while Derek split his time between her bedside and their infant daughter, running a company worth millions while his world collapsed around him. The day Audrey died, Rose was exactly 100 days old. Derek sat in that hospital room, holding his wife's cooling hand, and felt the universe laughing at everything he had built. He had escaped poverty. He had built a company. None of it mattered, because the woman he loved was gone, and he was alone again. The months after Audrey's death were the darkest of Derek's life, but every morning, Rose woke up needing him. Her cries pulled him out of bed. Her smile reminded him why survival mattered. He learned to change diapers during conference calls, to code with one hand while cradling his daughter, to be both father and mother to a child who would never know the woman who gave her life. Franklin stepped up as co-parent and business partner, handling the office while Derek worked from home. Nexus Logistics exploded during the pandemic. The company's valuation quintupled. By the time Rose turned 5, Nexus Logistics was valued at $250 million, and Derek Holloway, the class loser, was one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs in the country. But he never forgot Westbrook Academy, and when the invitation arrived, he knew exactly what he was going to do. The envelope arrived on a Thursday afternoon, cream-colored and expensive, addressed in calligraphy that probably cost more than Derek's childhood wardrobe. Westbrook Academy class of 2015, 10-year reunion. The return address was Chad Prescott's real estate company. Derek stared at that name for a long time, memories surging like floodwater against a dam he'd spent a decade building. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside was an invitation printed on cardstock, heavy enough to stop bullets, with gold embossing that caught the light. The reunion would be held at Westbrook Academy itself, in the gardens behind the main building. Black tie optional, RSVP requested. At the bottom, in handwritten script, Hope you can make it, Derek. Would love to catch up. He recognized Chad's handwriting from the notes that used to appear in his locker, promising violence. 2 days later, Franklin forwarded him a screenshot from a group chat. His cousin worked as a caterer and had been hired for the Westbrook reunion. She'd overheard something and thought Derek should know. The screenshot showed a conversation between accounts Derek recognized, even after a decade. Chad, Bradley, the Ellis twins, Victor. A betting pool. 200 says Holloway doesn't show. 500 says he's still poor as dirt. 1,000 says if he comes, we make him cry again. There were laughing emojis. There were comments wondering if Derek still flinched at loud noises. There was Chad, typing with confidence. The class loser probably kills himself if we push hard enough this time. Some people are born to be beneath us. Derek read those messages 3 times, each reading turning something cold and clear inside him. That night, after putting Rose to bed, Derek sat in his home office and made a decision. He would attend the reunion, but he would not go as the victim they expected, shuffling in with his head down. He would go as what he had become. He picked up his phone and called his executive assistant. I need you to arrange something. The Westbrook Academy reunion. I'll be arriving by helicopter. The weeks leading up to the reunion became meticulous preparation. Derek flew to New York for a custom suit fitting. $3,000 for Italian wool that draped like liquid shadow, tailored to emphasize shoulders, broadened through years of carrying weight. He had his helicopter detailed, the Nexus logistics logo gleaming. He rehearsed nothing. Whatever happened would happen. Rose noticed the change in her father. "Daddy, why are you sad thinking?" she asked one evening, curled against him on the couch. Derek smiled, stroking her hair. Daddy is going to see some people he knew a long time ago. People who weren't very nice to him. Rose considered this gravely. Are you going to tell them they were mean? Derek laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in weeks. Something like that, sweetheart. The morning of the reunion dawned clear and warm, October painting the trees in colors of fire. Derek dressed slowly, each item feeling like armor. The shirt, crisp and white. The tie, silk and subtle. The suit, fitting like a second skin. He looked in the mirror and saw someone he barely recognized. Not the cowering teenager who had eaten lunch in bathroom stalls, but a man who had walked through fire and emerged carrying the flames. The helicopter lifted off at 3 in the afternoon. Derek watched the ground fall away, his childhood neighborhood visible in the distance, the tiny house where his mother had worked herself to death. Westbrook Academy appeared on the horizon like a castle. He felt the old fear trying to claw back. He breathed deeply and reminded himself what he'd survived. Bullies couldn't break him. Poverty couldn't break him. Losing his mother, losing his wife, raising a daughter alone, none of it had broken him. A group of overgrown children in expensive suits certainly wouldn't. The helicopter descended onto Westbrook's front lawn, where the reunion was in progress. The rotor wash sent cocktail napkins flying. People pointed. People stared. Derek opened the door into silence, so complete he could hear his heartbeat. 200 former classmates stood frozen, champagne glasses halfway to lips. Their eyes tracked him as he stepped onto the grass in that $3,000 suit, something far more impressive than their collective inherited wealth, because it represented what they had never achieved. True, self-made success. Chad stood near the front, flanked by Bradley and the Ellis twins. They looked older, but not wiser, faces carrying the softness of men who had never struggled. Chad's expression cycled through shock, confusion, then something like fear before his public mask snapped back. He raised his champagne glass. "Derek, what an entrance! Didn't expect you to show up like this." His voice projected confidence that didn't reach his eyes. Derek walked toward them with measured steps. The crowd parted like water. He stopped 5 feet from Chad. Chad, Bradley, Carter, Cooper. Victor. He named them one by one, watching each man flinch. Thanks for the invitation. Chad recovered first, his smile sharpening into something meant to cut. Nice helicopter, Derek. Business must be good. What is it? Charter service? Uber for aircraft? The Ellis twins snickered on cue, but the sound was uncertain, like following a script with missing pages. Derek felt the old rage stir, felt the ghost of mashed potatoes on his face and cola burning his eyes. He let himself feel it fully, then let it pass. He had survived worse than Chad Prescott's insults. The helicopter is mine, actually, one of 3. Derek's voice was calm, conversational. Nexus Logistics owns a small fleet for executive transport, makes it easier to visit clients on the coasts. He watched Chad's expression flicker, watched the calculation happening behind those cold eyes. The name meant nothing to Chad. Why would it? He had never paid attention to anything that didn't revolve around himself. But others had started pulling out phones, fingers moving across screens. Derek could hear the whispers beginning, spreading like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. Jennifer, who had been kind to him once in chemistry class, before social pressure made kindness too expensive, was first to say it aloud. Oh my God. Derek Holloway. The Derek Holloway. Nexus Logistics. She stared at her phone, then at him. Your worth. This says your company is valued at $250 million. The number hung in the air like a detonation, obliterating the narrative Chad had maintained for a decade. Jennifer's voice rose with genuine amazement. You're one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs in the country. Chad's mask cracked. That can't be right. Derek Holloway, a millionaire? The kid who couldn't afford lunch. There's got to be some mistake. But people were showing each other their phones, pulling up articles from Forbes and TechCrunch. Self-made success. How Derek Holloway built a logistics empire from nothing. From poverty to power. The inspiring story of Derek Holloway. Derek watched the shift happen in real time, postures changing, expressions transforming from amusement to awe to shame. There's no mistake, Derek said quietly. I built that company from nothing. While you were inheriting your father's businesses and squandering trust funds, I was working 80-hour weeks, sleeping on office floors, turning every obstacle into opportunity. While you were betting on whether I'd show my face, I was closing deals worth more than your father's entire real estate portfolio, Chad. The silence was devastating. Chad's face went pale beneath his tan. Bradley stared at the ground. The Ellis twins had taken unconscious steps backward. Victor had disappeared entirely. For the first time in 10 years, the golden boys of Westbrook Academy had nothing to say. But that's not even what I'm proudest of. Derek reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone, scrolling to a photo of Rose on her 5th birthday, surrounded by balloons and joy. This is my daughter, Rose, named after my mother, who worked 3 jobs to keep me in this school, who died before she could see what I became. My wife, Audrey, passed away when Rose was 3 months old. I raised that little girl alone while building a company, while grieving, while learning that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting up every single time you do. He looked at Chad with something almost like pity. You spent 4 years trying to break me. You failed. You just made me stronger. Mrs. Patterson stepped forward, the guidance counselor who had done nothing. Her eyes were wet. Derek, I'm so sorry. I knew what was happening. We all knew. We did nothing because Chad's father donated money, because it was easier to ignore one scholarship student's suffering. I've thought about you so many times over the years. She gestured at the helicopter, the suit, the man. I don't have the right to say I'm proud of you, but I am. Something loosened in Derek's chest. Some old knot that had been there so long he'd forgotten it existed. Thank you. That means more than you know. He turned back to Chad, who stood alone now, his friends having melted into the crowd. I didn't come here for revenge. I came because I needed to see for myself that the past doesn't own me anymore. That you don't own me anymore. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You told me once that I would always be nothing. I want you to remember that. Every time you see my company's name, every time you read about my success, I want you to know you were wrong. Chad's mouth opened, closed. Then, unexpectedly, I'm sorry. The words came out cracked. I'm sorry for what I did to you. I was a monster. I knew it then, and I know it now. I've never done anything worth a damn with my life. My father's money. My father's company. None of it's mine. I've never built anything. Never earned anything. And you, he laughed bitterly. You built an empire. You raised a daughter alone. You became everything I was supposed to be and never was. The apology hung between them. 10 years too late, impossibly inadequate, yet somehow genuine. Derek studied Chad's face, searching for the predator who had made his adolescence a living hell, and found only a middle-aged man confronting his own mediocrity. I'm not going to pretend that erases anything. What you did affected me in ways you'll never understand. I still have nightmares. I still flinch at sudden movements. He paused. But holding on to hate is like drinking poison expecting the other person to die. So I'm letting it go. Not for you. For me. For my daughter. For the future I'm building instead of the past I survived. The sun had begun its descent, painting Westbrook Academy in shades of amber and rose that seemed too beautiful for the weight of the moment. Derek stood in the center of the reunion, like a stone that had finally stopped being shaped by water, finished, formed, at peace with his own contours. Former classmates who had never spoken to him were approaching now, some with apologies, some with questions about his company, some with simple respect they had denied him for 4 years. But his attention kept drifting to the helicopter gleaming on the lawn, waiting to carry him back to the life he had built from ashes. Jennifer found him as he was heading back toward the main group. How did you survive it, Derek? How did you keep going when everyone wanted you to fail? Derek considered the question seriously. I stopped looking for rescue from outside. Teachers weren't going to save me. The administration wasn't going to save me. The only person who could save me was me. So I made a decision to become someone the world couldn't ignore. Not for revenge, for survival. For the mother who sacrificed everything. He touched her arm gently. Tell your daughter that the pain she's feeling now is temporary. What she builds from it can be permanent. Bradley appeared at Derek's elbow, looking considerably smaller than he had in high school, despite being the same physical size. Can I talk to you? After graduation, I took over my father's media company, ran it into the ground within 5 years. Bad decisions? Too much leverage? Too little understanding of how anything worked. By 30, I'd lost everything my family had built over 3 generations. He laughed without humor. I'm an assistant manager at a car dealership now. My ex-wife has the house. I see my kids every other weekend. He met Derek's eyes. I spent 4 years treating you like dirt because you were poor. And now, I'm the one with nothing. Derek listened without interrupting. When Bradley finished, he said, That sounds incredibly hard. I'm sorry you went through that. Bradley blinked, expecting mockery. You're sorry? After everything I did? Derek shrugged. Pain is pain. Failure is failure. It doesn't matter how much money your father had. Losing everything still hurts. Your kids losing respect for their father still hurts. He paused. I know what it's like to lose everything. My wife died in my arms. Money doesn't protect you from grief. Success doesn't immunize against suffering. We're all just people trying to figure out how to survive. The conversation shifted something fundamental in Derek's understanding. The Golden Boys were middle-aged men wrestling with divorces, bankruptcies, addictions, the slow realization that inherited advantage wasn't earned achievement. Derek found himself feeling something unexpected. Compassion. Mrs. Patterson caught him as he was heading toward the helicopter. "Derek, before you go, I wrote a resignation letter the day after your graduation. Never sent it. Too afraid of consequences. Too worried about my pension." Tears streamed down her face. "But watching you today, seeing what you've become, I'm going to send it. I'm going to tell the administration exactly why. I'm going to make sure this school reckons with what it allowed." She grabbed his hand. "You gave me courage today. 10 years too late, but courage nonetheless." Derek squeezed back. "It's never too late to do the right thing. That's something my mother used to say." Chad intercepted him at the lawn's edge. "I need to ask you something. I've been thinking about what you said, about building things instead of inheriting them. Do you think it's too late to actually do something with my life, to become someone I'm not ashamed of?" The question was so vulnerable that Derek's defenses lowered entirely. "I was 22 when I started Nexus Logistics. My mother had just died. I had nothing except debt and determination. If I had listened to people who said it was too late, who said people like me don't succeed, I'd still be mopping floors somewhere." He held Chad's gaze. "You're 42. You probably have 40 more years ahead. That's 40 years to build something, to become someone, to prove that the boy who bullied me wasn't who you really are." He climbed into the helicopter. "The question isn't whether it's too late. The question is whether you're willing to do the work." The helicopter rose into the evening sky, and Westbrook Academy fell away beneath Derek like a weight he had finally set down. He watched the reunion shrink to a collection of lights and tiny figures, then disappear entirely as they climbed above the tree line. The pilot said nothing, respecting the silence that Derek needed. Below, the world stretched out in patterns of gold and shadow. Beautiful and indifferent and full of possibilities he had once been told were never meant for people like him. Derek thought about his mother as they flew toward home, about her hands, rough and red from cleaning other people's houses, pressing a $5 bill into his palm for the school book fare because she wanted him to have one thing that was his alone. About her voice, gentle even when exhausted, reading him stories about boys who slayed dragons and conquered kingdoms. She had died believing he would become something, and she had been right. Not because she had special insight, but because she had given him the most powerful gift any parent can give, the unshakable conviction that he was worthy of love and success, regardless of what the world said about people from their tax bracket. His phone buzzed. A photo from Franklin, Rose in her pajamas, holding up a crayon drawing of a helicopter with Daddy written above it in wobbly letters. Derek smiled so hard his face hurt. This was what mattered. Not the vindication of proving Chad wrong, not the satisfaction of watching his former tormentors grapple with their own inadequacy. This mattered. This little girl who had made him a father, who had given him a reason to keep fighting when grief would have happily swallowed him whole. The house appeared on the horizon as the last light faded from the sky, a warm glow emanating from windows that represented everything Derek had built from nothing. Franklin was waiting on the patio, Rose asleep in his arms. Derek took her carefully, cradling her against his chest, feeling her heartbeat align with his own. "How'd it go?" Franklin asked quietly. Derek considered the question. "Better than expected. I finally understand something my mother tried to teach me a long time ago." Franklin raised an eyebrow, inviting elaboration. "She used to say that the best revenge isn't success, it's becoming someone who doesn't need revenge anymore. I never really understood what she meant until today." He looked down at Rose's sleeping face. "Today, I watched people who tried to destroy me realize they had failed. But the victory wasn't in their realization. It was in mine. I'm not defined by what they did to me. I'm defined by what I built from the wreckage. Later that night, after Rose was tucked into bed, Derek sat alone in his home office. He pulled up his mother's photo, the only good picture he had of her, taken on his graduation day. "I did it, Mom," he whispered. "Not for revenge. For you. For Rose. For the scholarship kids who need to know their beginning doesn't determine their ending." He opened a new document and began typing. The Holloway Foundation, a scholarship fund for students from disadvantaged backgrounds attending schools where they didn't belong, where their poverty made them targets. Full tuition plus living expenses. Mentorship programs. Mental health support. Everything Derek had needed and never received. This was how you transformed pain into purpose. The foundation announcement spread 2 weeks later. Derek's inbox exploded. Journalists, investors, but the messages that mattered came from students who saw themselves in his story. He read every one. He responded to as many as he could. He began speaking at schools, sharing his journey not to brag, but to illuminate a path others could follow. 6 months after the reunion, Derek received an unexpected email from Chad Prescott. Subject: "Thank you." He had sold his father's company and started a nonprofit providing anti-bullying education to private schools. He had entered therapy. He was making amends. "You asked if it was too late. I've decided it isn't. Not because I think I can fix what I broke, but because trying is better than not trying. I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted you to know your words mattered." Derek sat with that email for a long time. The boy he had been would have savored this moment. But Derek wasn't that boy anymore. He typed, "I'm glad you're trying. Good luck, Chad." Then he closed his laptop and went to read Rose her bedtime story. Years would pass. Nexus logistics would go public. The Holloway Foundation would fund hundreds of scholarships. Rose would grow into a fierce young woman who knew her father's story, not as revenge, but as resilience. Derek would remarry, finding love with a pediatrician who understood his scars. The nightmares would fade, but never disappear entirely. Some wounds simply become part of you. But on quiet evenings, Derek would sometimes pull out that old invitation and remember the moment everything changed. Not the helicopter landing, not Chad's apology. The moment he decided to go. The moment he chose to face his past instead of running from it. The moment he understood that the class loser from Westbrook Academy had become something far more important than successful. He had become free. Freedom meant the past no longer owned him. Freedom meant living for the future instead of against history. The helicopter still sat in his hangar, still bore the Nexus Logistics logo, but he rarely used it anymore. He preferred to drive through neighborhoods where kids with holes in their shoes walked toward futures that seemed impossible. He would slow down sometimes, watching them, remembering himself, and he would whisper what his mother had whispered. "Where you start is not where you have to finish. Keep walking. Keep fighting. Keep becoming." Then he would drive on, toward home, toward Rose, toward the life he had earned one impossible day at a time. The class loser who had arrived by helicopter, the single father who had built an empire, the broken boy who had learned that scars can become wings.